to do this review. I think that's probably why I've been procrastinating all day and why I busted out the margarita. But I got up this morning saying this is what I'm going to do today. Plus, I do have another review, so again, if you see this outfit, I'm not going to change. I also did this, so why waste good intentions? Today's book is Holly Jackson's As Good as Dead, which is the final book in her A Good Girl's Guide to Murder trilogy. And if you know how much I enjoyed A Good Girl's Guide to Murder, you'll get why I haven't been wanting to do this review. I was hoping that the second book, Good Girl, Bad Blood, was just a blip because it's a middle novel, but this book was such a disappointment. To me, it was horrendous. It felt like two completely different books. I wasn't sure what I was supposed to get from it. Margarita break. If you're unfamiliar with this trilogy, go back and watch my other videos, or just read the books yourself and form your own opinion. But they revolve around this girl named Pippa Fits-Amobi, who sets out to do her senior project, her capstone project, on the murder of a young girl named Andy Bell, and then the subsequent suicide of her boyfriend, Sal Singh, who was blamed and convicted by popular opinion of the murder. Jackson does rely heavily on events from the first book. Like, she constantly references things that happened. So I would recommend reading them all so that you don't feel lost. One of the events that happened in A Good Girl's Guide to Murder was this guy named Max. He drugs his female classmates and he rapes them. In Good Girl, Bad Blood, we are seeing his rape trial. He's found innocent. That's where we pick up here with Pippa meeting with him and his lawyers, because in her investigation, or the research for her capstone project, because as much as I liked A Good Girl's Guide to Murder, I felt like the capstone project was really just an excuse for Pippa to solve a mystery. On one hand, I didn't mind that, but on the other hand, it wasn't something that felt intentional. Like, it really did feel like Pippa's intent was to explore this murder, but then Jackson used the capstone project as just a jumping off point rather than a stabilizing factor. In any case, in the course of her research, she had interviewed Max. He essentially said, yes, I was putting hypnol in girls' drinks and then raping them. When he is found innocent, she's like, well, you know what? I'm gonna post this to my really, really popular podcast. So we're opening with her meeting with him and his lawyers because apparently her posting this has caused him harm and cost him money and cost the family emotional distress and blah, blah, blah. So I was pretty excited. I wanted resolution with the whole Max storyline. While I was excited to open with it, I thought that it was kind of slow. I was never really happy with the way that his storyline was handled, and even at the end of this book, he got his justice, or she got her justice, but I don't know. I would have preferred if Jackson had gone another way. I can't say if that's just a personal thing, because it's kind of gritty in the way that it happens, and I like things that are a bit neater, or if it just didn't work. So if you've read the books, give me your feedback. Tell me how you think she handled it, if you liked the way she dealt with it, which by the end of this review is not going to be a mystery, but I'm trying to keep things a little mysterious almost immediately, and I think this is part of my problem with the whole Max Hastings thing. Almost immediately, we get sucked into another mystery. And so again, the whole Max Hastings, I can't talk. I should not have waited till nighttime to do this review. Self-soothing techniques. While we open up with the Max Hastings thing, it is yet again put on the back burner until the second half of the novel. Honestly, I kind of forgotten about him by the time that the first novel ended, so the fact that she just keeps prolonging it is annoying. Pippa gets caught up in this serial killer called the DT Killer. The bigger issue is that somebody has already been convicted for these murders, but she realizes all these things that are happening to her. Like when she Googles these keywords, they all come up as the DT Killer, and she says, maybe I should look into this. Before she even realizes it's the DT Killer, she suspects that she's being stalked. So she goes to the police, who subsequently say, we can't help you. And that is something that bothers me. Because at first, I liked the portrayal of the police. Because it's true. Sometimes the police just can't do anything. They don't have the resources. They don't have the manpower. Maybe there's other things that take priority for one reason or another. But they weren't incompetent. They're just doing the job the way they're supposed to do the job, whether she liked it or not. But the further this series progressed, the more that devolved into her essentially saying, the police are no good, I have to do it all on my own. What book was I reading? It wasn't a book. If you've ever heard of Focus on the Family's Adventures in Odyssey, one of those episodes deals with these two girls who are both running for school class president. One of them, her private journal has been stolen, and things from this journal are getting posted all over school and put in the newspaper, and private thoughts are being sent to friends, so that there's just a lot of drama. She suspects it's the other girl. She goes to the principal. The principal's like, okay, there's nothing I can do now. We don't have any proof, but I'll look into it. Of course, she doesn't believe him, and she kind of takes things in her own hands. But at the end of the episode, he says, look, I told you I was going to look into it, and I did. And so I was hoping that was what we were going to get here, was that even though the sheriff said there's nothing he could do, that he was still going to try, and he didn't. It's just one of those cliches that I can't stand, where it's the bumbling cop. It's the police who don't do their job. So she takes matters into her own hands. This is the first half of the novel, in which she's trying to figure out who the DT Killer is. The second half of the novel, this is really where my issue comes in, because Jackson's strong suit is her storytelling, like the detective, the sleuthing. And we stop that halfway through the novel. Here's a spoiler. Good Girl's Guide to Murder was about the murder of Andy Bell, and basically the clearing of Sal Singh's name and just what happened to Andy Bell. Andy has this really domineering dad. He has made a reappearance in this book saying, you ruined my life because of XYZ. I want nothing to do with you. We are enemies. What we learn of her in the first novel and all the things she did that brought about the events of the first novel are spurred on, and I'm talking about Andy here, are spurred on by her dad, because she learns that he is dun, 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 the DT Killer. On one hand, I kind of liked that we saw Andy in another light, because she is sort of one-dimensional in the first book. And so I did like that. Everything we thought we knew about her, we didn't really know, because her motivations were completely different. But on the other hand, I kind of liked her being a mean girl and her just bringing things on herself because she thought only of herself. I was also a little bit annoyed that we could not come up with something new and fresh, because as much as I enjoy authors pulling things from previous novels, I wished that we had brought an outsider in rather than keeping the problem within the community. One thing I really enjoyed was, I think it was the second novel, because she had started her podcast and she had gotten an email about asking, what will you do when you disappear, or who will look for you when you disappear. So this is kind of what I feel Jackson said, that's how I'm going to write my third novel. So I like that we're pulling minor details from previous books to build up the plots for the successive novels. I think that's great. But I just was like, can we move on from the Bell family? Do we really need to rehash all of this? Couldn't the killer be someone completely different? Or even one of my issues is there is one character named Nat from the first novel who cannot stand Pippa because Pippa suspects that she could perhaps be behind Andy's murder, and then she also suspects Nat's brother Dan because he's also involved in various ways. He's not really a great guy. Turns out neither one of them is involved. But then we get to the second novel, and again, suspicions are cast upon them, and he's a police officer. You also get the sense that he's not really good at his job. And so by this novel, he is a suspect once again as the DT killer. And I'm like, all right, are we finally gonna get something about Dan? Because we keep bringing him up, and there's never anything that results from it. So why does he matter? And then it turns out to be Jason Bell. I was like, I mean, I saw it coming from a mile away, but still, why do we keep bringing up Dan if he never has any substance to him? Like, if he's just up here, and we keep giving him stuff that could pull him down here, but he never stays down here with the depth. We get to the middle of the novel in which Jason Bell abducts Pippa, and he brings her to the warehouse because he owns a landscaping company. So he brings her to this warehouse where he is going to ultimately kill her. She ends up escaping. However, and I'm on the fence about how I feel about this. And this is why I feel like the novel is misnamed. I think it should be Good Girl Gone Bad rather than whatever it's actually called. Because this is where the novel really takes a turn. This is where Pippa, I don't understand her. I reached out on Twitter because I really wanted to talk to someone about this book because I felt like Pippa devolved from the first book. I really enjoyed her in the first novel. I thought she was smart and strong and clever and witty, and I enjoyed her process of figuring out what happened to Andy Bell. Her mental state and the way she approaches situations feels so out of character from then on. By this point, I'm just like, who are you? And so the person, because I don't have a big following on Twitter. People don't answer any of my tweets. The one person that did said, well, it makes sense if she is suffering from PTSD. And that's true, because she's had a lot of traumatic experiences, because the 3 novels take place over the course of about 2 years. So a lot does happen emotionally and mentally to her. But I don't feel like that is properly addressed enough for me to say, yes, she's suffering from PTSD. At this point, Pippa, she's able to escape. She gets to the edge of the woods. Instead of just walking on, she says, I'm gonna turn around and I'm gonna kill the DT killer. I'm gonna kill Jason Bell. Instead of saying, oh my gosh, I should still go to the police and just claim self-defense, she covers it up. And she gets every single person who has been a major player from book 1 involved in this cover-up. I understand suspended belief, but would my closest friends really willingly become accessories after the fact in order to help me cover up a murder that I could justify? He kidnapped me, he was going to kill me, he's already a serial killer, and apparently he's multiple serial killers. Like, he's not only the DT killer, but he's also a serial killer under other names for other strings of serial killings. Can someone really get put away for that kind of a killing? Not only did I think this was ludicrous, but we spend an inordinate amount of time going through every single action she takes in order to cover up this crime. It's not just, oh, I killed him, and then I got my friends involved, and this is how I established my alibi, all of our alibis. It's, I killed him, I call my boyfriend, I tell him my plan, And here is every single step I take in order for us to cover up what I've done and set up Max Hastings. And then here's everything else I do in order to get my friends involved. And then here's how I set up my alibi. And then we're gonna move on because people have found the body and I'm really worried that we didn't set it up properly. Ugh, I think not only did I not like that this was 2 books in one, it would have been more successful if we'd carried on that DT killer aspect, because that was really good. I really enjoyed the first half because all these inane little happenings really built up into something spooky. I was getting sucked in, and then all of a sudden she is abducted and we go on with the rest of the novel. There's something wrong with me, especially with this series. There's something I've gotten wrong about each book in this trilogy before I entered it. And my misassumption in this book was that Pippa was basically going to have been abducted from the very beginning. And I thought that was an interesting concept because she's the sleuth. She's the one who is finding people, who is solving the mysteries. Yet, who's gonna look for her when she's gone? So I thought that was a really interesting conundrum as to what would she do if she was the one missing. On one hand, I hated that is where we went, but on the other hand, I thought it could have been really cool. And I think it's just because of how it was handled. Because I didn't need a step-by-step guide onto how to frame someone for murder. That would have been an even better title than As Good as Dead. Because was she as good as dead? What are we referring to? At the point where she was abducted, she realized she was as good as dead. So are we talking literally, as in at this point in the novel, this is what she was saying to herself? Or are we talking figuratively? Because who she was is as good as dead. Because she has changed so much, and because of what she's done and how it has affected her and her relationships from here on out. Essentially what happens is they do everything that they need to do in order to successfully set up Max Hastings as Jason Bell's killer. But what Pippa hadn't realized was that the DT killer always takes a memento. And what he had taken from her were her headphones, and they have the logo of her podcast, A Good Girl's Guide to Murder, on them. When she gets called into the police station, she doesn't realize that he's taken them. She out and out lies to the sheriff about the last time she had seen Jason Bell and something about the last time she'd had the headphones. And then when he says, well, how come they were in his nightstand, she loses the plot. All this stuff happens. In the end, Ravi, what he does is he goes to the sheriff and he says, look, she told me what happened. She told me about how you showed her these headphones, and it was me. I had borrowed them without her knowing, and then I'd gone to Jason's house because of XYZ. I must have left them there, and that's why he had them in his nightstand, and then everything is fine. But in this interim, she is just spiraling. She was so concerned about making sure that none of her friends could have been pinned for the murder. She essentially says, because she's going to go to Columbia for college, and she's like, well, I just need to distance myself from all my loved ones. Like, I don't deserve them. And this is where I had an even bigger issue with her, because part of this was oh my gosh. Part of this was exacerbated. Oh my God, I can't say the word. Part of this was made worse. I guess this is going into effect by the narrator, because I really didn't like the way that she would voice Pippa, especially when Pippa was stressed, because She made her sound really weak. She just decides, I need to distance myself. She goes into this huge pity party. In the end, what she says is, if Max Hastings gets his comeuppance and everything works out, then I'll take it as a sign that everything will be okay and I can reestablish my relationships, which is what happens. Max Hastings, they find him guilty and he goes to jail, and then the last thing we see is a text message or an email from Ravi, so we get the impression that, yes, they have reconnected. Where was I? The whole headphone thing, I thought was kind of dumb, because, alright, sure, she lied. But I didn't think that her lie merited that kind of reaction, because the first time we notice that these headphones are gone, or right after the murder, right after she's come home and done everything she's needed to do, and she's looking for them, and she just assumes her brother has them because he takes them sometimes. And then when she's called in, blah, 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 I can understand kind of freaking out. But, okay, so she does use them every day. But sometimes you forget, like, things happen and you forget you haven't had them in a while, or she'd be like, oh yeah, that's right. There are ways that she could make up for the fact that she thought she'd had them, or why Jason Bell would have them, because yes, it is suspicious that they would be in his side table, like his bedside table, but what if she dropped them and he had found them and he had picked them up, and for some reason that's where he put them? I just don't think she needed to spiral the way she spiraled. And then when Ravi comes to her rescue, she freaks out, and I was just like, I guess the stress of killing someone and covering it up can do it to a person, but I thought it was too much. I was really glad to see Ravi back, because he's kind of the voice of reason. I enjoy Ravi, although I didn't think they had the same chemistry that they had in the first book, and maybe it's because they've been together about a year, so they've sort of settled in, but still, I want to feel something between them, and I felt like Pippa just gets so caught up in herself and that she doesn't give Ravi the attention he's due. I thought it was, again, ludicrous that he would go along with her plan, because he's smarter than that. He's pre-law, and he says, yeah, I'll help you cover up a murder. Really? I know this is a book, guys, I do, but it doesn't make sense. It just doesn't. As much as I liked the DT killer angle, what she'd initially been doing, because she had her podcast, the first season was about the Andy Bell murder. The second season was about what happened in the second book. And so the third season, what she was going to do was solve this other unsolved murder. And I kind of wish that she'd stayed on that track as well. Like either the whole novel had been about the DT killer, or the whole novel about her trying to solve this other murder. There's just so many things that got dropped because Holly Jackson literally stopped in the middle of the book and wrote a new book. Like the guy that had been arrested and convicted as the DT killer. So much more could have been done with that. Or even Pippa being hunted down, or her trying to figure out who the DT killer was. Like, I thought all the red herrings and the zigs and the zags were wonderful. And then we're just done and we're thrown into something else. As far as Max Hastings goes, sure, fine, at least he got convicted for something. But Jackson made a really big deal out of his blue water bottle. So I thought it was going to be much more sinister, when what she was setting us up for was that is what Pippa used to drug him with. He fell on his own sword because he had used Rohypnol to drug girls, and so then she goes and uses Rohypnol to drug him, so then she can make him look guilty, and she does it via his water bottle. And I was like, I kind of feel bad for Max, because Pippa's coming after him. He's not a good character. He's not someone you should root for. But what did he do? Like, in this novel? Because I'd essentially forgotten about him in by the end of the first novel. And then we just keep having it dragged on that I didn't care. Find another scapegoat. One of my really, really, really big overarching issues is In the first book, Pippa is set up with this massive friend group, like far too large than we needed it to be, just in terms of characters. Too many of them, and it was unnecessary. So I'm thinking maybe this is one of those things where Jackson is just setting us up for something bigger in the last novel. No. What happens is Ravi and Pip are walking. They run into Art and Lauren, who are walking Lauren's dog. A few comments are made, and they all keep walking. That is it. And I was like, you made this big mention of these people in the first 2 books for that? It's like she lost steam. She just lost perspective, lost her direction in this last novel. She had a strong first novel, and she had strong ideas for her second and third, although honestly I don't know if she really had a strong idea for this third novel, because it was 2 novels in one, and no. But she just couldn't figure out how to execute them the way they needed to be executed, the way she did the first. Maybe she just didn't have time. Maybe that was her problem. But I was just like, all the things that made Jackson's writing so great in that first novel, it's like she forgot how to do it the further into her trilogy she got, and that was so disappointing for me. Whew. I'm old. That stuff was basically all slush. Now my molars hurt. It was just too cold. That is gone. And there's so much more about this novel that I could talk about, but I've made my points. It was a terrible novel. I absolutely loathed Pippa's evolution or de-evolution, however you want to put it. I loathed the way that we stopped in the middle and we picked up on a completely different storyline. The narration, oh my gosh, guys, and that reminds me, if you saw my review of Good Girl's Guide to Murder, you know what I did. Because I loved that book so much, I bought all 3 on ebook, and then I bought all 3 on audiobook. I wonder if iTunes, iBooks, will accept returns, because at least for those audiobooks, they're not bad, but they weren't worth my $20 or $25. Because what I say, like, the narration has a really pleasant voice. I enjoy listening to her until she speaks for Pippa, and then Pippa sounds so weak. She just lacks a strength and a conviction. Maybe I should email them and say, I really hated this series. Can I get my money back? We'll find out. Stay tuned. There we go. Don't forget to like, subscribe, comment, do all that fun stuff that tells me I'm not alone. And I'll catch you later. Bye. Ooh. Actually, I'm going to try to fit this in somewhere. I just realized that I had one last point after I signed off. One last thought that I wanted to impart that I thought could have been really cool. I said how I hated the second half, due in part because we got a step-by-step playbook of every move that Pippa made. And so what I thought would have been really cool is if we didn't know what she actually did to Jason Bell, if maybe the entire novel was something of a retrospect of, this is my new murder mystery, and this is what I'm trying to solve. And sure, maybe she's still trying to blame it on Max, but I thought it would have been really cool if she had let us believe she didn't know who did it, and then revealed at the end she actually did it, because that way I could have bought Jason Bell being the culprit. I could have bought not introducing new characters and having this character that we are already familiar with being back in the spotlight. It would have been so cool if maybe she had opened up with her podcast and she'd been like, so guys, this is my new case. This is something that just happened in my town and I am going to pursue it to the fullest extent. Acting normal. So nobody knows that she actually did it. Maybe then I could have accepted the recap at the end of, well, this is what you were shown. This is what we told you happened and how we think it happened. But really, this is what I did to pull it off. I could have gotten behind Pippa because I would have accepted her change in attitude and personality. But at the same time, she would have still been clever and still been witty and still been the Pippa from the first book, the one that I've come to respect and enjoy because she's so smart. That would have been another really great approach that Jackson could have taken towards this book in fooling the reader. Maybe you guys are going to disagree with me. Maybe you would have hated to know that she'd gone to the dark side, but she killed a man in cold blood. Sure, she was under duress of sorts, but she chose to do this. And more so, she chose to cover it up and blame it to frame another person. Granted, he should have been punished for his previous actions, but he didn't murder someone, okay? He didn't. Ooh, that was weird. He didn't murder anybody. Those are two completely different things, two completely different kinds of punishments. I'm not excusing him. I'm not excusing him. But anyways, what I was going with was, you might disagree with me. You might hate that Pippa goes so bad by doing it my way, but she still went really bad. So I don't see a big difference. I just think it would have been a lot more clever of a book if we'd thought that everything was normal and that Pippa was still just doing the Pippa thing, only to realize Pippa was behind it all. So anyways, now I'm really done and I'll talk to you later.